now.
Okay.
Good to go.
I'm just going to start chatting. I teach public speaking right now. I teach in the Communication Studies department, and one of the things that the public speaking class requires is that I record the student speeches, and they hate watching themselves on video. So I'll have to tell them that I was recorded for this because they'll feel like it's their revenge against me because they hate being recorded.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
So you're involved in teaching them how to give public lectures or speeches?
Yeah, I teach in the Communication Studies department, and public speaking is one of the classes I teach. I hear that you work in community health and spreading education and information about health issues.
Yes. I graduated from NTID,
Okay.
and it's a school for the deaf in New York.
Okay.
Oh, there's a technology program at that school. Well, technical program there. That's like a medical and computers, graphic design. There's several programs like that there, and I graduated from there. And then after I graduated from there, I moved here to Minnesota, and that's where I met my husband. I'm originally from Ohio. And I met him in Rochester, New York. So we got married here. So then I started working at a company called Lufkin. It's an odd name. In the medical lab there.
Okay.
I worked with home nurses that would go to different houses. I would work with like blood draws, and I would collect those and I would test them. And I'd work on those in the lab, and it was in Minneapolis area. So I would test different things like pregnancy, thyroid tests, liver tests, kidneys, blood types, all of those different types of tests is what I would do. Oh, I felt pretty isolated because I was the only deaf person working there. And I was teaching all of these hearing people, so I felt really isolated. So then I decided to go to the Red Cross.
Okay.
So then I became an HIV counselor. And I worked towards certification. Now I teach juniors about different health-related issues related to HIV. There's a lot of deaf students that don't know anything about HIV. A lot of times they're finding that with deaf students or deaf kids, parents are very careful and protective of them, so they don't teach them about HIV, and they don't have the interpreter to learn about these things. And a lot of deaf kids don't have the chance to learn about sexual things or know nothing about sex, so they have no one to go to and they don't know anything about it. And their parents don't want to talk about it because they're like, oh, they're deaf. I don't want to,
So
know. So I decided I wanted to become a health educator. So I learned different tests like the HIV and breast exams and all of the different exams that you can do. So I became a community health worker. So I've been doing that for about 30 years now, and so now I teach deaf young about like HIV and things that they wouldn't necessarily learn about.
In 2007, I took a class through MCTC. It is the
Sure.
and I took the community health worker program class there, so I could become certified to do that.
I'm really interested in what you said about parents wanting to protect their deaf children from information about sex. And do you think that's because parents fear that their deaf children are vulnerable? Or is it because parents are processing the whole idea of having a child who's different from other children? Or is it just a combination of things?
So parents just don't have conversations with their children about sex. And these kids are missing all of the information, like how do you put on a condom, what is pregnancy, what does that entail? They don't know anything about this, and they miss all of that information. And it's more common that males don't have that conversation with their parents, and it's starting to get a little bit worse. And in schools, they don't teach anything in depth about sex. They just kind of cover the basis. They don't really go in depth with the subject, so that's what I do.
Do you find that when you talk with the kids that they want to have these conversations, or are they embarrassed, or are they shy about it?
I know that they want to learn more, but they don't know how to have the conversations. They don't understand the signs because they see the words on their lips, but they don't know what the signs are, so they have a communication barrier. They don't know how to talk about it. So they either don't understand the words like on their lips, or like if they're blind, they can't even see how the words are formatted either.
So part of what you do is teach vocabulary. Is that you teach vocabulary about how to talk about sex in ASL?
So if the schools teach it just on like the basis, then they already know some of the words. But if the schools do not go in depth with the subject, and they go to a hearing school, then I'm there also to teach them some of the signs. But the interpreter will usually finger spell all the words. They don't actually sign the word, so they never learn. Like the sign for vagina is like this. And they finger spell it, but they don't understand what the sign is for it. They don't understand the concept of it. If you're just seeing the word finger spell, they don't understand what's actually going on. So the word reproductive, if you keep spelling it over and over and over again, the hearing students will be also looking at the interpreter and be like, oh, I want to learn how to sign this, and kind of make fun of the language. And it gives the hearing student something to do, but the deaf student is missing out on the signs for the words. And it helps when the interpreter also signs them and actually signs the words like vagina and sex, but a lot of times they don't understand the concept of it.
Sure. I've taught classes where I had a student who was hearing impaired, and I had interpreters working with me as I taught class. And I can understand if there's some reluctance on the part of the teacher or the interpreter, because hearing students are distracted sometimes by interpreters, and especially on an uncomfortable subject like sex, they would want to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay if the hearing students will learn the different signs for it. It's not a bad thing. They're not dirty signs, but a lot of times they misuse them.
Sure.
Like if it's a public lecture or sign, I mean, it's the same concept. They're both out there in the open.
Right, well, high school students misuse, terms in English for, sexual reproduction and things like that. It's part of the, childlike use of language that you push your boundaries and like that. But I think sometimes, my opinion is that we're too constrained to talking about sex anyway, and that's a community health issue for hearing and deaf students. But that I could see how that added layer of not understanding the language, and using it kind of as a joke. Yeah, I could see that would be really challenging. Do you have a particular student population or a particular school that you really like to work with when you're working with young people?
I work with a variety of schools. All chemical dependents as well, in the chemical dependent program. In Riverside?
Sure.
I'll go to the clinic with one of them and we'll go together in the meeting room, or they'll come to the clinic with me, but it's with a variety of people. It can be younger people, older people, variety of races and ethnicities, deaf, and a different range of deaf as well. It just depends on what their needs are. In English, it's said a little bit differently than it does in ASL. And it doesn't always match what the meaning, it doesn't always match. Like if it's in English, it's different than if you were to sign the exact same thing in ASL, it doesn't mean the same.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am deaf and they are deaf, there is a communication clarity. We understand our culture, I can understand the language, and there is mutual understanding in discussing some of the various issues.
Sure.
I'm very enthusiastic about wanting to teach and help people to learn more about these issues, and also serve as an advocate for them.
I had a conversation once after I had some students like this come and practice in one of my classes, and I was teaching that day in an interpersonal communication class about gender differences in conversation, how feminine communicators tend to have a unique style, and masculine communicators have a style that sometimes creates communication barriers. And after that class, the two students who were interpreting stopped to talk to me about the challenges of talking about gender in ASL. And that conversation really stuck with me, because they said that the concept of gender is complicated, and I'm wondering if you encounter that and what you think about that, and I'd like to know more.
Oh, I just forgot what I was about to say.
That happens to me all the time.
hard of hearing is a completely different group. So sometimes they are more of an oral, they will lip read, and they don't always understand signs, they're trying to pick it up. Like sometimes they can read my lips and say what I'm saying. And if they don't understand what I'm saying, there's a lot of sounds that make the same formation. So what did I just say? Like, I love food.
I love food.
I love you.
Yeah.
I love food. They look the same.
Confusing.
So I can either be talking about I love you, or I can be talking about I love food. Like oral sex, that doesn't make sense. What is that? I've never heard of that. I mean, are you talking about like males or females? Like, are you talking about blowjobs? What kind of oral, what does that mean? So that doesn't always make sense, and it's a dangerous topic.
Sure, because of the confusion. Do you find when you work with, GLBT people?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's many a variety, like transgender, lesbian, gay, a huge variety. We discuss like the importance of protection, barrier methods, condoms, but there's a variety of people.
Is it a challenge to talk about the concept of gender in ASL?
Some of them understand the concept of gender and identity. I mean, it depends on how they were raised. It depends on how they were brought up with their family. It depends on how they feel about themselves. It depends on who their friends were, their community, their environment. Some of them feel more suppressed and more private. Other people don't feel as suppressed either. So it really depends.
Okay, interesting. When we talk about gender differences in my interpersonal communication class, we tend to talk about how masculine communicators share a style that makes it easier for them to connect, and feminine communicators share a style that makes it easier for them to connect. Do you think that's true when people are speaking ASL as well?
Definitely. For a masculine communication style, it's more direct, and females aren't as direct, but it depends on how they feel on the, like if they,
Okay, so, when we're dealing with gender and so forth, and their likes and how they are attracted to people, men tend to be more attracted to muscular and so forth in a gay situation. So you also have situations where a man may like men and women as well.
and they may have like a relationship with a woman, but also are starting to notice that they are having feelings for men. Oh, and then sometimes they're thinking about like a one-night stand with another man.
I hope that we are having the raunchiest conversation ever in one of these practicums. That would be an accomplishment for me. Yeah, I would enjoy it. Maybe we should change the subject. When you are thinking about becoming a better educator, what are the things that you strive for? Because I'm always thinking about trying to become a better educator, and one of the things I'm trying to work on is being more authentic, being more myself, and being less like a teacher, like an authority figure. What are things that you think about when you think about being an educator and your style?
And before you answer that question, we're gonna switch